Yep.
That gets a thumbs up.
Call this meeting, special meeting of the Municipal Council to order at 7:12. Please stand and join me in a salute to the flag. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Withers. Would you kindly read the notice of the special meeting?
I'd be happy to. It's July 22nd, 2019, to the members of the Municipal Council from Mark J. Cooper, Council President. Council is by authority of Article 2, Section 2-7C of the Attleboro Home Rule Charter. I hereby call a special meeting of the Municipal Council as follows. Date Tuesday, August 6, 2019, time 7 p.m., place Council Chambers. The purpose is to hold a regular and committee meeting to handle any legal matter before the Council. Sincerely, Mark J. Cooper, and CC Mayor Paul Heroux.
Thank you. So the reason for this evening's special meeting was to start the process of the, provide facts and testimony to the council regarding the issue with Columbia Gas and the gas leak on Torrey Street. At this time, I'm going to recognize Councilor Kobus for who he has asked through his committee to come address the council. And then any questions that the council has, we can clearly ask the individuals that come or send them to Council Kobus for feedback of after you've reviewed the information that we've been receiving over the past couple of weeks. Any questions from the council regarding that? So again, tonight's really about fact-finding and testimony from the public. We all heard that the water superintendent and the fire chief, unfortunately, both are, or fortunately for them, are on vacation this week and were not able to attend. But we will, at a time that's convenient for them, have them come provide any additional insight into this matter. Any questions from the council at this time? Hearing none, Council Kobus.
Thank you. Reporting for the Zoning and Land Use Committee. The way I'd like to format this discussion is we'll do a quick introduction. We'll talk about the goals, the process, and whatnot, and then we'll hear from the individuals that are here. The order I have, if they're present, is the mayor, Representative Hawkins, an expert from BU, Nathan Phillips, a representative from Parks. Councilor Waterman will then summarize the discussions he had with the residents, different residents on Torrey Street. Then DPU, if they're here, Columbia Gas, Water, Fire, Police. And then after we've heard from those individuals, we'll have a general discussion on the next steps. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that is that I did speak to the mayor tonight and on Thursday or Friday about this, and he also said that he was not available to come tonight, so he is not here. But he will or may come back when the superintendent and or the fire chief appear.
Perfect. Excellent. So the goal for this investigation is to identify what happened leading up to the evacuation of houses on Torrey Street on the night of April 26th and determine if there is anything we could or should have done differently. That's it. It's not about placing blame or anything like that. We want to determine what happened and discuss if there's anything we believe the city could or should have done differently. Just to quickly review the process by which we've arrived here. On July 18th, we discussed a resolution asking the mayor to look into this and conduct the investigation. During that discussion, we decided to conduct our own investigation. I then worked with Virginia to schedule a date that worked for most of the council and scheduled this date. I then developed a list of individuals to speak to and developed a list of different questions for each of those individuals. And then I sent out those questions in an invitation to attend tonight on July 22nd. And then responses that have been coming in, I've been sending them through Virginia to the full council. There are a couple of items that I distributed tonight that didn't make it into that packet from Friday, so I apologize for the late notice on that. Two of the items, one is a letter that arrived this morning from the president of Columbia Gas, and we'll discuss that later. And another item is just a quick storyboard summarizing the information that I put together over the weekend, that I just passed out tonight. Did everybody have a chance to check their boxes and get that stuff? Okay. And then later on tonight, we'll decide how to move forward. We'll talk about, did we address the goal or not, and if not, what else do we need to do? And so we'll discuss that. A couple quick definitions that you may hear thrown around tonight. People may talk about LEL, and that's the lower explosive level for natural gas. When people are talking about 1%, 100% or natural gas, they're talking about of the lower explosive limit for natural gas, which is at 5%. So LEL will be thrown around when they talk about in the fire report that 6 Torrey Street was at LEL. That means it was at a level where if there was a spark, it could explode. The other thing that will be discussed is grade 1, 2, and 3 leaks. And just so that you understand the different levels, a grade 1 leak represents an existing or probably hazard to persons or property and requires repair as immediately as possible. And so when there's a class 1 leak, that's when Columbia Gas shows up and they don't leave until it's repaired. That's a grade 1 leak is the highest level. A grade 1 leak is what we had on Torrey Street that was leaking from the street into the houses there. A grade 2 leak is non-hazardous to persons or property at the time of detection, but justifies scheduled repair based on probable future hazard. And then a grade 3 leak is a non-hazardous to persons or property at the time of detection and can be reasonably expected to remain non-hazardous. And then just a quick summary as best as I understand it, just sticking to the facts. I collected all the different, the police report, the fire report, reports from the water department, and consolidated all of that into this one timeline and storyboard. And so just so you understand the rough timeline, it will get into more of the details, but I just want to make sure everybody generally understands what happened. So on April 22nd at 6:47 a.m., a water main break was reported to the water department. At 4:22, on April 22nd, the water main repair occurred in vicinity of 5 Torrey Street, where a gas line was bumped or nudged, depending on where you hear it from. So on this sheet here, 5 Torrey Street is this house here. The patch closest to that house is where the water repair was done. All right, moving along. And then on April 26th at 11:13 p.m., a traffic incident occurred in vicinity of 124 Emery Street. So this right here is 124 Emery Street. The car driving along Emery Street drove off the road, hit a sign, hit a rock wall, the brick stairs of 126 Emery, and then finally collided with drove into 124 Emery Street. At 0048, Attleboro fire on April 27th. So the accident happened at roughly 11 p.m. Just before 1 a.m. the next morning. Attleboro Fire Department was dispatched for a gas leak. And then later on, Columbia Gas also responded. And on 4/27, Columbia Gas repaired a gas leak in vicinity of 5 Torrey Street. And if you look on the street there, the patch in the middle of the street is where the repair was conducted. The houses that are marked with the red dots indicate a house that was evacuated with gas readings in the basement between 1.5% to 2%. And I confirmed with the fire department that was 1.5% to 2% gas level. So we're not talking about 1.5% to 2% of the LEL. This is 1.5% to 2% total gas level, and remember, 5% is the lower explosive level. And the fire report also indicates that 8 Torrey Street was at LEL. But in talking to the fire chief today, I confirmed that was a mistake in the fire report, and they actually meant 6 Torrey Street there. So 6 Torrey Street was at LEL. Additionally, when they measured the natural gas levels in the manhole right there at 5 Torrey Street, it was at 100% natural gas. And I discussed with the fire chief, I asked if that was LEL or is that the gas level. He indicated that was the gas level in email discussions today. And then following down here in this bottom little cutout, zoomed in, you can see some of the dig safe markings from that. We don't know necessarily what was under the blue car. We don't know if that's what we can see. That's all the information I have as far as the dig safe markings. But the yellow markings down there indicate gas, oil, or steam, and the white markings are the area for proposed excavation for the water department. So that is a brief summary consolidation of the information I've received. That's based on police, fire, and water reports, as well as some discussions with the residents. Any questions on that before we move on? All right, the first person for us to hear from tonight would be the mayor, if he's here, but you indicated the mayor is not going to be here. Okay. In discussions with the mayor, he did mention that he had conducted his own investigation and this was a routine gas leak and there wasn't anything to be concerned about. I expressed that we would like to hear from him, so it would be great if he could come in at a later time. Moving on, the next person for us to hear from is State Representative Hawkins.
Thank you, President Cooper, and thank you, Councilor Corbis, for your work on this. As a resident of the city, I'm happy that you're taking care of this important matter. A couple things going on in the city for a long time.
I set that up special.
Yeah, I was trying to make it for a short guy. I was trying to make it for a short guy, and it was set up for a tall person. Yeah, I know. Thank you for your work on this. As a resident of the city, I'm happy that you're taking this seriously. There's probably 2 concerns with gas in the city in any form. One is, of course, explosions, and the other is the quality of the air that we're breathing. So in both cases, this is something I'm glad that you're taking it up and seeing how we stand with it. I want to thank Tracy Manzello, who comes from Citizens Against Rehoboth Compressor Station, which is, of course, abutting the Ponset Hewitt Field, were it ever to be built, who's been quite active on these issues in the community and has a lot of support from Attleboro residents. And I also want to thank Dr. Phillips for coming out to speak to us with some expert knowledge on gas leaks. There's 2 kinds of distribution systems. One is, of course, the compressor station, which is on hold at the moment, at least for the moment, in Rehoboth, and there's been some quite controversy around the one in Weymouth. And that is probably the only legislation, and I'm coming from the state end of this that's pending, is legislation around the compressor station in Weymouth. Most notably, as I was talking to Dr. Phillips, is air quality measuring equipment that's been proposed. At the moment, the only air quality equipment that's being used for the proposed compressor station in Weymouth is at Blue Hills, which isn't very close. And that's the legislation. There's nothing really pending right now to do with the distribution lines, which is what you're talking about right now, that are underground and go to individual homes and businesses. There is a history that I can tell you where the state stands with this in terms of legislation. In 2014, The legislature undertook the passage of a bill that established a uniform natural gas leak classification standard for the Commonwealth. The legislation was signed into law in 2014. Some of the key provisions for leaks is it requires all grade 1 leaks, which you described, which are the most serious, to be repaired or receive continuous surveillance until a hazard is eliminated. Grade 2 leaks are required to be repaired within 12 months, while grade 3 leaks require reevaluation. It requires gas companies to file an initial plan that includes a timeline for removing all leak-prone infrastructure on an accelerated basis. It requires gas companies to provide a summary every 5 years of their replacement progress to date and a summary of work to be completed during the next 5 years. Further increases public safety by requiring strong communication between municipalities and gas companies regarding projects that expose gas infrastructure, and requires gas companies to prioritize any repairs detected within school zones. 2016 legislation was an act to promote energy diversity, adjust the acts relative to national gas leaks, which I just described, to repair grade 3 leaks with significant environmental impacts before other grade 3 leaks. This also requires gas utility companies to report to DPU the company's lost and unaccounted for gas, LAUF, each year, and the LAUF, lost and unaccounted for gas, will be the difference between the total gas purchased by the gas utility company minus the sum of the total gas delivered to customers and the total gas used by the gas company to conduct its operations. So gas pipes leak everywhere. So this would be a measure as to how much is leaking into the atmosphere that we're breathing. Not so much a safety concern, but a quality of life concern. Some of this gas is fracked gas that comes from Pennsylvania, so we don't necessarily even know what's in it. But Dr. Phillips can talk more about that end of it. That's everything that's happened in the State House for gas leaks and pipeline security. If you have any questions, I'm on the TUE committee, which is telecommunications, utilities, and energy. I was in the hearing after the Merrimack explosions. I listened to a lot of testimony on gas pipeline safety, both for, particularly for the distribution network that goes to houses. And I don't think anything's come out of that yet for regulations, some perhaps from DPU, which is an administrative office, not us. I don't know that there won't be in the future. But it's certainly we learned a lot about what happens with gas leaks in that hearing and how they're repaired, how pipelines are replaced, and so forth. Probably at the state level, we have some more work to do.
Thank you. Any questions for Rep. Hawkins? Councilor Dolan?
Hi. Would I be able to get what you first read in 2014?
Yes.
Would I be able to get a copy of that? That you referenced the leaks 1 and 2?
Yes, you can.
When
have
they're supposed to be repaired. Can I get a copy of
You
that?
can have this. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's easy.
Any other questions?
I can have this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then just make copies to circulate.
I scribbled
Councilor
those on
Water.
it,
Representative Hawkins, when you met with the Lawrence community, I'm not sure who you met
but
with.
it wasn't with the Lawrence community, it was with the gas companies.
Oh, 'cause with the gas companies.
Right, so
Okay.
there's, I think, 6 gas companies in the state, and they all testified on their procedures for replacing pipes. The cast iron pipes are
Okay.
prone to cracks, and with frost heaves and so forth, they move, and those need to be replaced with plastic pipes, which is what was happening in Lawrence, is they were replacing cast iron pipes with plastic pipes.
Okay. Actually, that's good information to know. Thank you.
Any other questions for Representative Hawkins at this time?
In Lawrence was slightly different because that was construction, and it was being done by a subcontractor. It was National Grid, and it wasn't National Grid employees. It was Feeney Brothers contractors who were doing this. So the question comes up, which is totally not relevant to this discussion, is how do you know that they're certified and qualified to be working with the larger pressure pipes? That was what a lot of the discussion was in the hearing. There's not much oversight for that. In this case, it's done by Columbia Gas employees, union employees who are very qualified to do this work.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Not for me.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. The next person to come before us is Dr. Phillips from Boston University. He's studied gas leaks for 10 years, I believe you said?
Yeah, somewhere around there. So,
Just your name and address for the record, sir.
Nathan Phillips, and the address is 73 Charles Street in Newton, Mass.
Great, thank you.
And if I could, one of the reasons I was excited to have you before us is, as a resident expert, if any of us have sort of general questions about natural gas leaks, you're the person to answer them. So thank you for coming in.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And although I don't know the details of this particular incident, I hope to just talk a little bit generally about the safety issues. And also wanted to thank Rep. Hawkins and Tracy and Karks. Have worked with them on these issues in the past, and so thank you for mentioning this as well, this opportunity to meet with you. So my background is I'm trained as an ecologist at Boston University. I'm in the Department of Earth and Environment, and I've been studying trees. I'm a tree physiologist. That's kind of the core of my expertise. And by real just serendipity, about 10 years ago, I learned about the gas leaks problem because it kills trees. So literally in Newton, I was walking with my son 2 blocks away from our home, and we met someone who was looking at gas leaks. His name is Bob Ackley. There's no one probably in the world that knows gas leaks more than this fellow Bob Ackley, who's been doing this for 30 years. And he was looking for gas leaks that are damaging trees. And because I'm a tree physiologist, that's what hooked me into this issue. And then I realized that I actually had a skill set to help out on the issue, because my area of expertise as a tree physiologist is understanding how water moves through the tree, how gases are exchanged from the trees and the environment as in the soils. So when I learned like gas was escaping, I had the skills to be able to look at that issue. And so it went from trying to understand, well, why are these trees dying? And we now know it's pretty straightforward. The gas displaces oxygen. The roots need oxygen to metabolize. So basically the trees are killed by asphyxiation in the soil. The roots die. But that was just the start of it. And then I realized that there are these explosion hazards, which I never in my career thought I would be dealing with an issue that relates to, an explosion hazard. And then as you go out from the point of the leak, whether it's the tree damage or the explosion hazard in areas around there, you start to get these other problems that are occurring at larger scales. And so the air quality issue that was mentioned previously is a problem outdoor as these methane leaks go into the air. There's the odor, which has health impacts itself. These sulfur compounds that are added to the gas so people can smell them actually have negative health impacts. And then there are other compounds in the gas. The gas itself, if it goes into the outdoor air, can participate in photochemistry. So if the sunlight hits it and it mixes with nitrogen compounds, other compounds in the air, it can form ozone, ground level ozone, which is bad for respiratory health. It's bad for every living thing, basically, not up in the stratosphere, but down here. We don't want ozone, and it starts to form that ozone. It also forms formaldehyde in the air that we're breathing. So if we're walking through gas leaks every day, and we would hear these stories from people, oh yeah, I smell gas when I go jogging every day. Those people, and maybe walking their kids to school, are having a chronic impact of breathing in the gas and the things that it leads to in the outdoor environment. So that health issue then we're finding more and more actually is outdoors, but it's also indoors. And we've found that it's not unusual for there to be gas leaks indoors, in homes. It's not at the levels that were discussed, that you shared, where you're getting to the percent level or that level, but there are, even in my own home, we had a leak in the basement because every time there's any joint or any connection, there's a chance for a small leak to occur. So you might have it not at the percent level, but 1/100%, which is not anywhere near explosive, but you're breathing that in 24/7. And what we're learning about, if you don't combust that gas, there are a lot of compounds in raw uncombusted gas. There are methane is the biggest. There's usually about 90 to 95% methane, but there are compounds like ethane and butane and propane and hexane, octane in smaller amounts in that gas. There are other compounds like benzene and toluene and xylene and a whole host of what are called volatile organic compounds, and some of those are known to be toxic. So we don't really know what the exposure is in terms of a broad public exposure to these indoor leaks, but there is a concern about the gas leaks that are happening indoors at low levels. And then we also know that even in cooking, when the gas is combusted, like in cooking, which is doing what it's supposed to be doing, it's intended to be burned, that there are also some health impacts, including oxides of nitrogen and particle matter that are formed in the combustion of gas. So these are areas also that are of concern, the health concern both outdoors and indoors. And then at the largest scale of concern is that the gas leaks, the methane itself is a very, very powerful heat trapping molecule. And so it's many more times more powerful than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. And so that goes really to the kind of global scale concern with the gas leaks. So that's just a sweep of the scale of the problem at different scales. And then there's the money, the lost commodity costs. So we estimated from our study in 2015 in eastern Massachusetts that about a little under 3% of the gas was leaked into the atmosphere. And that, at the time of the study, amounted to about $90 million in lost gas, lost value of that gas per year, and that's borne by the ratepayers. So there is definitely a money issue involved there as well. So that's kind of the sweep of the issues with the gas. And I would just say that the risk profile for safety for explosions it's been called a black swan type of risk profile, in that these are low probability but potentially high impact events that can happen. And so third-party hits are the number one causal agent of explosions or situations like what you had back in April. And then what happened a year ago in the Merrimack Valley really illustrated how the scale at which we can have gas outages and gas disasters really can go to thousands of homes in that particular case. And if you think about the architecture of this gas system, it is a bit like a tree in that there's a trunk, these big transmission lines that then branch out into intermediate pressure lines, and those branch out into smaller lines. And the significance of that is that if there's a hit somewhere along that pathway, everything downstream of there is potentially affected. So single point failures are possible in the gas systems. And if there were 7 homes affected in that particular case, that would be like a twig on this tree getting hit. But basically the things downstream of there are going to be affected by wherever that event occurred. That's. I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you might have about that, but that's kind of what I wanted to share.
Councilor Kobus, do you have a question?
I have a couple questions. Can you talk a little bit about underground leaks when there's a leak underground in a pipe, how that sort of dissipates? Is gas heavier than air, lighter than air? Does it travel through the ground? Does it follow water lines? How's that work? Does it What are the trends with
Yep,
that?
excellent question. So the gas is lighter than air, so it will tend to move up and be buoyant. And so there's that general tendency, but it's really going to follow all paths and the path of least resistance. So we often see if there's a leak that we can pinpoint in a pipe below ground, it's going to come out in various locations. It may be coming out in a utility so-called manhole cover with the holes there like was found, and at the same time it's seeping out of the soil in the near the sidewalk and a seam in the pavement itself. So it really is a very complex set of pathways from any particular leak. And it really is just, I mean, you can just imagine in your own mind, it will emanate in all directions, and it will just basically follow the paths. The most will come out in the paths of least resistance.
Excellent.
Any other, did you have any, Council Waterman?
Yes, in the evening that we're going to be talking about specifically, it was pouring rain. I am just curious if that could affect the gas if it had leaked, and how much, raining very hard.
Yes, and that's a perfect example. These leaks can be dynamic depending on weather conditions, including rain or snow and frost. These represent resistance barriers to the gas, and so they can alter the pathways that the gas comes out. So literally a hard rain will block the pores in the soil, or other porous areas will be blocked off, and the gas will have to move in another direction, maybe into the manhole cover and coming out in that particular direction. We also, even a more subtle than the hard rain kind of scenario, is even air pressure. We found that when you have low pressure days, we find leaks in these utility manhole cavities that on a high pressure day might be a 1% gas. So it's not at that explosive 5% level, but then on a low pressure day, it can actually come up and even exceed the 5%. And so you have these situations in which it can the conditions of a leak can migrate between being sub-explosive and above that threshold, depending on something even like the atmospheric pressure. So there are a lot of subtleties to this, and that's why I think it's really important that we err on the side of lowering those thresholds to be extra safe. In fact, we have been proposing, myself and what we call the Gas Leak Allies, to lower the level at which a grade 1 leak in a confined space would be a criterion. From right now, it's, even though it's 5% is the lower explosive level, they consider 4% or 80%, 4/5 of that level to be where they say, okay, this is grade 1. So it's a little safety margin that's put in there. But we think it should go down all the way to like 1% in a confined space to just add that extra buffer to account for these times in which there can be these fluctuations where the gas in a confined space can even kind of go above and under.
Great. Councilor Delicio, then
you.
Jackson.
Doctor, this is great information. So I'm looking at this, listening to what you're saying about path of least resistance and how it all branches off. So after just about let's just call it 4.5 days, we saw 5 Torrey Street with a 1.5 to 2% level.
In the basement?
In the basement. Mm-hmm. So would it be a safe assumption to say, if this car accident happened 10 days later, it would be up closer to 4? If it was 15 days, it could be closer to 8, so on and so forth?
That's an excellent question, and without other information, it's really hard to say. It would be some combination of how fast that gas was leaking out of the pipe, wherever the pipe was damaged, and then the ventilation level of the home in the basement, and kind of those factors, playing off of each other. So Whether it was kind of ramping up over that 4-day period of time and kind of steadily going up, or it had hit like a level at which it was balanced with what was coming in versus what was going out, would require, and maybe that may be something that is probed further in this investigation, but it's hard to say.
But not necessarily outside the realm of possibility.
Yeah, that's a possible scenario.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Jackson?
Thank you. Good evening. So, when most people smell gas, they call fire department, police department, 911, whatever, to say that. So this began on April 22nd. We don't know when exactly the leak started. And on April 27th, the accident happened. So you're talking a good 5 days. But there were no calls that they smelt any odor. Is that unusual? Because usually you smell the gas is there, and most people say, oh my gosh, I smell gas, you know.
Yeah, so there are definitely differences between people's sensitivity to the odor. So that's one factor that is involved. Is it confirmed that there was a leak on the 22nd, or
No.
is it, so it's possible that there was no leak until the car hit the thing?
Right.
Is that, and then was there an odor call at that time? Is that what prompted the first responders to come out?
No, I think it was just the accident.
The accident itself.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So if there were a sizable leak that was on the 22nd, and there were that many homes involved,
Mm-hmm.
I would tend to think that there would have been an odor complaint.
Thank you.
There can be situations, there have been reports of gas leaks that in fact led to explosions. There was a New York case, Horseheads, New York, where no one smelled an odor, but the house blew up. And the attribution in that case was that they think that the soil pathway basically scrubbed out the odorant, because there are microbes that can be in the soil that actually metabolize sulfur compounds like these sulfur odorants. So that's a very rare case, but there have been reports of no odor, but there was a gas problem.
And Councilor Jackson, I believe Councilor Waterman will mention it. There was an individual on Torrey Street that smelled it in the street, a couple people, and then the wind blew and it was gone. But in between the date of the water main repair and the car accident. But I'll let Councilor Waterman discuss that more.
But it wasn't discussed with the fire department at all.
They did not call it in.
Thank you. Counselor Dolan?
So when you talk about the path of least resistance, when I was doing some research on this, so you had indicated the rain could stop it from dissipating, so going up, which is probably the first place it would go.
Right.
And that I was told that, like you said, it can follow water mains, gas, whatever it is, because I had read that people can have gas levels in their house that don't even have gas, that don't have natural gas.
Yes.
So when it's looking for the path of least resistance, if your house happens to be that, you could have low levels of gas inside your house when you don't even have gas service. Is that true?
That is absolutely true, and I know that for a fact because one of my fellow gas leak allies advocates had that situation happen in her home. She has no gas service, but there was gas in the basement from a leak that was confirmed to be outside. You might have heard about this actually yesterday. There was a struck line on Temple Street, like 1 block away from the Massachusetts State House. I don't know if you were evacuated. You were not there. But they had to evacuate a bunch of homes on Temple Street, which is just really like a block and a half from the State House. And I think they were evacuating the State House. They did not? Okay. Yeah, so anyway, that on that street is a case in which not just yesterday, but prior to that, a known gas leak was diffusing into a house that had no gas service. And you're absolutely right that any other infrastructure, like a water main, the kind of the resistance right next to that, it might be packed in loose soil or sand or have some other pathway that allows the gas to come in.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Phillips at this time? Thank you.
Okay, and maybe I wanted to just, a little proper demo. This is the combustible gas indicator. This is one of those meters that the first responders and the gas company can use to actually pinpoint in the soil or in a manhole where the gas is. So I'd be happy to, demonstrate or something at some later point in time. But citizens have been, with training, been able to use devices like this to investigate, gas leaks, but it definitely requires, it's not at the same level a first responder or a gas utility would.
Counselor Dolan?
So with that, does that narrow it down to where the most gas is? Does it narrow it down to where the gas leak actually is, since it does travel, the gas does travel, and it could be down the street somewhere, like?
Yes, this pinpoints where it is in the subsurface.
Okay.
And so basically you'll get like from 50% gas to 60%